Hello. Yesterday in our notes about the Dakota, we talked up here where it said they're semi-nomadic, meaning they're spending their summer in one place, in this case, living in a bark house, and their winter living in a skin teepee. That's not true for all of the Dakota. The Plains Dakota, if you're living in the plains, the grassland area, you're probably going to be living in a teepee year round because you're not going to have access to things to make a bark house. So looking at the notes here, talking about the teepee, it says the Dakota lived in teepees during the winter months, especially those that were living in the wooded areas. And as I just said, if you're living in the plains, you're probably going to be living in a teepee year round because you have more access to like buffalo hides to make your teepees. The shape of the cone did keep the hot air near the bottom. That's why the cone coming in pushes the air down. So it actually made it really nice and warm. The floors were padded with grasses and animal skin, so very comfortable situation. I don't know why that keeps popping up, but so then we go down here, and then the bark house, you can see in here is an example of a bark house. The Dakota would use the same bark house year after year, especially during maple sugaring, so collecting the maple sap from the maple trees, and then the summer planting. And there you can see it's called bark house because it's covered in bark. A bark house was one large room with entrances on both ends, and it would probably have a fire inside. Speaking of wild rice, let me zoom in a little bit here. Wild ricing was a very important event that took place each fall for the Dakota. And it took place in the fall because that's when the rice was growing up. That's when it was ready to be harvested. So there are some steps to harvesting wild rice. The first was they would host a celebration and make an offering Unktehi. It was the water spirit. As we mentioned yesterday that the Dakota believed everything had its spiritual meaning. So there's spirits of the water, storms, very many different spirits. So they'd make an offering to Unktehi saying, please provide us a good harvest. Then they would take the rice stalks, which you can see in the picture here, and they would tie them into a bundle and let them dry. And after they dry out, they would come through, and you can see the rods that they're holding here. They would use one rod to bend it over the canoe, and then another to hit the grain to have the rice to fall out into the bottom of the canoe. And they always did this barefoot, so they wouldn't wreck any of the rice. So then when they bring, because remember, they have to be on canoes because rice grows out of the water. So after they collect the grains, they then bring it to shore and they dry the rice out in the sun. After it had time to dry out some more, they roast it over a fire. And that kind of loosens the wild rice itself from its shell, from what they call the husks. So then after it dries out, they roast it over a fire. Once it's done roasting over a fire, they place it into a pit, and with some nice soft moccasins on, they step on it to remove the husks. And then after that, you put it into excuse me, into a basket made out of birch bark, and you kind of shake the rice up a little bit. So the rice itself is heavier. That'll fall back to the ground, where the broken husks and anything you don't want, they're lighter. They'll fly away in the wind. So now you're left with the rice that you want. So, and that would be a food they could have for winter, store for the winter. And then so the wild ricing took place in the spring. Wild rice took place in the fall. Spring is where maple sugaring took place. So that after things started to melt and the maple sap started to run after the winter thaw, they would test the trees to make sure that was happening. So that was step one in collecting maple sap. So once you know the sap's running, you're good to go. Then the next thing you do is you pound a wood chip into the tree cuts. So I'm going to zoom in some more. So you can see right here where these bags are hanging, they'd make a little cut into that, and then they would put a little wood chip in there because that's what's going to, the sap will start running off of the wood chip and start dripping. And as you can see here, it says collect the sap. Let me zoom out a little bit. Collect the sap in small birch bark dishes, which they're doing there. Because birch bark is waterproof. It has an oily substance on it that makes it waterproof, so nothing will leak out of it. That's why it is so quick to light on fire, is because of the fact that oily substance on it is flammable, and it's also waterproof. So it doesn't matter how wet it gets, you'll always be able to light it on fire. So after you collect the maple sap, you then pour it into a trough. You can see these wooden troughs here. And you boil the sap until it becomes a syrup. And so eventually the first step would go from a sap to syrup. and you boil it even longer, then it turns into a sugar, becomes a powder, maple sugar. In order to get 1 gallon of sap, you have to boil 1 gallon of syrup, you have to boil 40 gallons of sap. So it's taking a lot of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup. But this was a treat for them, especially if you get down to maple sugar. It's a really neat, really yummy treat, and that was important to them. And they did that every spring. So you had harvesting wild rice took place in the fall, maple sugaring took place in the spring, and that happened at the sugar camp. So they did that at the sugar camp. And one last thing I want to show you is we talked the other day about how important dancing was to the Dakota, not only Dakota, but many Native American tribes. So chanting and drums, and it was taken very seriously, and we call that a powwow. So I want to show you a little video about dancing and a powwow in the Dakota culture.
My name is Buck Spotted Tail. I'm from Rosewood Sioux Reservation of South Dakota. My Indian name is Sinte Galeshka. I've been dancing since I've been about 6 years old, pretty much all my life. You do one step on one foot, you do on the other foot, and like you try to move like the grass. That's pretty much how it was back in the day, and gradually it started changing throughout the years. And the old style was the old style, and they're kind of more put together. The contemporaries more out there and a little more outgoing throughout the song. It's like a family tradition. We watch our families grow up and do the dance, and that's how we gradually grow up and start learning our ways and learning that it's a fun thing that we normally do. A way to bring all our people together in a big celebration, feed all the people, do a lot of singing, do a lot of dancing. And it has nothing to do with, money or nothing. It's just all of us coming together as all Teoshbais, all families coming, all different chiefs' families, will all just come have a big Wachipi powwow.
Nope, you don't need to watch a commercial. Nothing exciting to do there. So hopefully you remember today that you had to do some reading. So you had to read pages 312 to 314 and answer questions 7 and 8 in your packet. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks for watching and have yourself a great weekend. Take care. Bye.